Welcome, everybody, to the Spawn of Me podcast. I'm your host, Kahlief Adams. I am joined this week and every week with my man, my mellow, the smooth kind of fellow, for episode 185 of our show, Sharif Jackson of SharifJackson.com. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Like, people can see what I look like, you know, now that we're live on Twitch. I don't want to scare too many fans away. But you know, this is how it is. If you haven't seen me on Game Looks Good videos or that kind of stuff, this is me in the flesh.
Oh my God.
So what is up, Chicago?
What is up, Chicago? We are live on Twitch. This is pretty good, right? I think it's pretty dope, right? Not bad. Not bad.
Yeah. I'm very excited, man. You know, like both of us have streamed games on Twitch, you know, so it's good to have the actual show on here.
Yeah.
And to have people interact with it live, and I know that some people have been asking about that, so yeah, I'm super excited.
I'm super hyped. We have also with us, as usual, per usual, we have the Duchess of Diversity. I like that, John. Yeah, Tanya the Passive. I need diverse games. What up, Tanya? How are you?
Not much. How are y'all? This is interesting to like be actually like on a show versus like just running my mouth with no camera.
It is weird, right? It's kind of bugged out to actually have people watch us while we do this now, huh?
That, and it's like I'm watching so I can say hi to the chat. So I'm like, hi, chat. It's weird to watch yourself.
It totally
it is weird, right?
It totally is super weird. Super weird. But I want to thank everybody for hanging out with us on Twitch, hanging out with us in podcast land. Again, we thank you every week for rocking with us, because we definitely appreciate you hanging with us in our show. We had a fantastic show for 184. Talked about a lot of game stuff and some personal stuff. I'm kind of happy I didn't get feedback about the personal stuff, to be honest. Cause
I was waiting, man. I wanted some feedback on that.
I don't know. Well, how do you give feedback after you kind of share your heart and soul and your stuff? Kind of literally.
I just think that, but I think that the reason that you brought it up and the reason that I thought it was good to bring up is because, as we said, it's a lot of health stuff, and a lot of men don't talk about that kind of health, and there are some people that have questions about that, might be thinking about it or stuff. So I thought it was dope for UNC to, you know, talk about like vasectomies and stuff. I thought it was dope.
Yeah,
I learned a lot. I learned a lot.
Word. And all the folks who actually have some folks at my job who, you know, they listened to the show and they were like, oh, so that's where you were. And I was like, my bad. I didn't want to share that information and put it in like the Slack. Like, you don't want to do that and be like, hey, hashtag with a like emoji for like vasectomies. Like, that doesn't really work. So I don't want that to be the thing.
Is there an emoji vasectomy?
I don't think so. I would hope not. I don't want to know what the visible representation of that would be in a thing. That's not cool. Anywho.
Touche. You got me there.
Oh yeah. Word. C is not with us this week. He's feeling a little bit under the weather, so everyone give him some love out in the world. Make sure that he is full of orange juice and other stuff so that he feels a little bit better. But this week, we have a really dope show. We have been huge fans of a game that is coming out really, really soon. Agents of Mayhem. If you have not been paying attention to that game, you need to have that on your radar and make sure that you are definitely checking that out when it drops. We have a very special guest from the team. We have lead writer Jason Blair with us this week. Jason, how are you? How's everything going?
Good, man. Good. Thanks for having me on.
Super excited to have you. And, you know, first of all, I got a chance to play Agents of Mayhem at E3 this past year. Or not this past year, this year. God, I feel like the time is flying. And all the things that you've all tried to hit at Volition, I feel like you've hit that level and you've surpassed it. You've hit this really interesting stride with the game. I want folks to kind of get a gist and an idea of what the game is. So if you could share that with the folks at home, that would be awesome.
Sure, yeah. So Agents of Mayhem is the latest game from Volition. People might know us from the Saints Row series. It's third-person open-world action game. It's takes a lot of inspiration from cartoons of our youth. If you can think like G.I. Joe, stuff like that. And the whole idea is that there's an organization called Mayhem, and they are a ragtag group of kind of, sort of, not really heroes who are out saving the world from a supervillainous organization called Legion. And the first game, Agents of Mayhem takes place in Seoul, South Korea. And the Legion's Ministry of Pride is present in there. So we have Dr. Babylon, who is the head of the Minister of Pride, and his lieutenants. They're in town wreaking havoc, and Mayhem has to come in and save the day with some collateral damage.
Word, absolutely.
Yeah. I love how you mentioned the kind of the throwback to the cartoons, because I definitely felt that in my short time in the game. Like, it really felt kind of joyous. Like, I just had this kind of smile on my face as I was watching some of the introductory kind of like sequences and things like that. Was that something that was kind of like always sort of on the board, like this is how we want to make our game, or like is that something that it kind of like developed into as you guys were like working on it?
The initial concept brought in a lot of inspiration from G.I. Joe, but also Archer, Venture Brothers, Guardians of the Galaxy, and so that stuff was part of the Agents of Mayhem DNA right away. It was early on, I'd say probably within the first year, that we identified what ended up being called Saturday Morning Redux, which was
nice.
if we were making Saturday morning cartoons for adults, what would they be like? And so once that term came out and was presented to the team, and it started kind of really getting its claws into everything, it became the touchstone of how can we make this kind of like Saturday morning, but different, modern, a little edgier, a little more grown up. And you can see like the visuals especially took a lot of inspiration. It's a very bright, colorful game. I think it's gorgeous. But it was something that was part of it early on, and then just helped inform everything about the game.
Nice. One of the things that I really enjoyed when I started to get my first hands-on, because it was 2 E3s ago where Cicero and I got a chance to get in for the first time, and hang out with some of the crew, hang out with some of the devs, and also hang out with some of the characters that you've made in this wonderful world. How does it feel to know and see the progression of the game, and also see how these characters that you've built have kind of grown and maybe into have a little bit of a life of their own, kind of bigger than where you might have imagined they might have started? As a writer, how's that been to kind of see that kind of push forward?
It's incredible. You have the idea of a character, and at some point it's just like a slug line, right? It's just like this one line of like, big brash roller derby girl, okay, right? Or like high tech pirate, and then they start to grow, and you build them out as a writer. You help build them out, but really almost immediately they become like, yes, they're your babies, but other people are going to raise them. And because artists get involved, concept art gets involved, modeling, animation, audio, and it's all the talents together that start to really make this character something in the game. And then once you get a voice actor involved, and they I consider like the bridge between development, like the technical talent, and then you have like the cast, essentially, right? The vocal talent. It's really the bridge between those two that make these characters. But then they go out into the world, they attach to other people, and they just become these things that aren't even really kind of part of you anymore. They belong to the gamers, they belong to the cosplayers, they belong to people who are doing fan art, and it's great, right? It's one of those things of like, all right, I help make this thing, and now it's out there, and the worst thing would be if no one cared about the characters, right? All this work went in, and they were like,
right.
oh, okay, yeah, cool. So every time I see a cosplayer, every time I see fan art, people quoting the characters, um, it's incredible. It's incredible. It is ultimately what I want out of these characters. So
Right.
Well, it's interesting that you said that because I was, learning about our guest, and one of the things you talked about in a recent post was putting down roots, and I was kind of wondering if that feeling of finally putting down roots translated into writing these characters.
yeah, yeah. The post you're referring to, Rez, is a really is a personal post, and that's why I made it public. No, but it talked a lot about kind of my personal journey, coming from my journey as a writer, and especially like freelance and kind of that when I spent years as a freelancer and always like scrabbling to find like the next job, right? So there's no sense of security, and that's kind of what the that's what I've been in Volition now for 5 years, and I'm finally able to kind of dial down that anxiety, that caged feeling, and just be like, it's okay to enjoy this. And again, as freelancer, I didn't really own anything. Most times when I was brought into a game, we already had models, already had locations, you already had a kind of a basic framework. And sometimes you could come in and like rearrange the Lego pieces. Sometimes though it was like, look, this is the game, put words in it.
Right.
And so there was a sense of like the check clears, and there's a sense of fun, and it was good to meet these people, right? But I wasn't nearly as invested. It felt it was a job. No matter how cool it was still a job. Agents of Mayhem, which is my second project at Volition. My first one was Saints Row 4, which was building on a franchise that I loved. It was one of the things that was really attractive. It was working on Saints Row, and so it was great to be able to play with other people's creations, which essentially is what it was. Even though I was there to help inform the entire package of Saints Row 4, it was still, people knew Pierce, people knew Shandy, people knew the boss, Kinsey, right? Like, there were established expectations. With Agents of Mayhem, it was the first time that I was able to really help mold the DNA of a multi-million-dollar project, and over the 4 years that I worked on Agents of Mayhem, 200 other people or more, including the outsourcers and that, I became more invested in this game than I think I'd ever been invested in a project. Even like I do tabletop games for myself on the side, but like just being part of this collaboration of this scale with this much, knowing that like people are wondering what Volition's doing next, and that people are going to be interested when we announce this. And that I'll be talking to people like you, like who are fans of the game, and like that's awesome. And that really kind of helped. That really kind of helped me when I decided to kind of take a break and take a breath and be like, this is something it's okay. It's okay, to be this invested in the project. It's okay to be this invested in the studio. I think working through Agents of Mayhem in a lot of ways is also me working through the fact that I kind of had some success, that I was no longer the eager, desperate 20-something who was like, how am I going to be a writer? How am I going to get paid?
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with Saints Row 4, I also saw that you worked on like the Conduit 2, which is probably
I did.
Which I'm probably the only one that ever played that since I actually played the Conduit on the Wii. And I Prey. So like you talk about sort of working in these established worlds, where I imagine there's boundaries, even in a game like Saints Row 4, which everybody thinks is like super crazy and you can do anything. I'm sure there's still boundaries that these characters have existed over like a years. So like I'm really curious in that experience if you still were able to surprise yourself with ways that you were able to still imprint yourself and extend over those, over the boundaries that you originally thought were in place for those characters on the older games. Yeah, and if that experience extended to the new freedom that you have with like Agents of Mayhem.
Yeah, yes, because I was able to find ways to put myself in there, especially with Saints Row 4, which Volition Games, especially the Saints Row franchise, there's a lot of room to play, and a good character has a foundation, a good IP, a good world has a foundation, but not every single move is mapped out. So you may know the motivations of a character, you may know the temperament of a character, mannerisms, things like that, connections, their history, but their path is not 100% predetermined. So you can use what you know about the character to get them from A to B, which is a lot of video game writing, right? It's a mission. You have to go to point A, go into point B, kill a bunch of people, unlock a vault, hack a thing, and then you're done, right? You've got to give that motivation. You've got to find a way to make the characters involved in that engaged and interesting, a way to connect that to the gamer. And I imagine, I've never worked in television, but I imagine it's a lot like, doing an episode of especially like a long running procedural or something, right? Where people are like, they have 11 years invested in this character. So like, okay, this is the framework of the character, but I still have to find a way to get to be interested in what I'm doing, and put myself in it. With Agents of Mayhem coming in as lead writer, I wanted to make sure that everyone, especially on the writing team, had that same freedom, and also, letting, like working with them to build up these characters, not just going off into a corner and deciding these are who these characters are, and now I'm just going to hand them to you. You make the words, but working with them to help inform these characters, because a philosophy that I've had for a while when it comes to any kind of creative work, especially a large-scale collaborative work, is everybody who works on the game should see themselves in it. There should be something that they can point to that is like, that's in there because of me. That's my viewpoint. That's my opinion. That's my sense of humor. Whatever it is, no matter what your discipline is, you should not just be filling out a checklist, filling out a ticket that someone submits to you. That's not what a studio is. That's not for me, what a fulfilling creative project is. It's about getting a group of people with different perspectives, different ideas, different strengths together, and creating something with them. So yeah.
So I'm glad you touched on that, because that's one of the things that we always talk about on Spawn on Me, is trying to see everyone that you possibly can, and have the spectrum be really, really wide. With a cast as big as you have, one, as a writer, how hard is that to make characters feel really special? Besides their kind of superpowers and besides their way of kind of just interacting with the world, and two, how is it, and what have there been lots of discussions behind the scenes about when you make when you have a pretty big cast, you have a huge cast, how is it that you kind of avoid kind of pigeonholing folks into kind of stereotypes and tropes and things like that? How's it been on the conversation side internally on the team of how to kind of avoid some of those pitfalls?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, with a large cast of characters, with a game that purports to be a global organization like Mayhem,
right?
It is on you to make sure that you're taking advantage of the fact that it's global, and you're taking advantage of the fact that there is a wide array of player character options available. Do interesting things, and outside of like the kind of the dressing concept, like the layer you're applying to make this person distinct, there's an underlying like nugget, and we would use, in the writer's room especially, we would use shorthand from other pop culture, right? We'd be like, we need a Hulk, we need a Joker, we need a whatever, right? Like, and people understand the basics of what that means, right? Now, of course, how are we going to dress up our Hulk? Well, maybe they're an ice person, maybe they're this, right? Maybe, we're bringing Oleg back. in as far as like the pigeonholing, first off, I think that in general the studios is very sensitive to the fact and aware of the fact that we have to do more and we have to do better when it comes to characterizations, so especially in this day and age of the technology being that the all the technology, all art, animation, fidelity, all of that puts you in a position where these characters can be very real. So you're doing yourself a disservice if you have access to all this visual fidelity and you're not doing anything interesting with it. And so, looking at the, you talk about the pigeonholing. We want that foundation of like, this is going to be our Hulk, this is going to be our Duke, whatever. Then you want to make that an interesting take on it, right? And just like, okay, how do we spin this so that this is a volition take on this character, and then you want to kind of line all those up and go, well, okay, like how do we make them distinct, like beyond their attitude, beyond the archetype that they're fulfilling? How do we make them interesting? Okay, well, we're a global organization. What are interesting cultures, interesting takes, and you can apply to the essence of that character, right? If we have a stoic, kind of a dark humored person with a real serious grudge against Legion. Like, well, what if they were an immunologist from Mumbai, right? Like, okay, let's line that up, right? And what's interesting about that? And then you start to it's a long process to try to build up these characters, and and you end up with a ton of characters. You can't make them all, so certain ones bubble to the top for different reasons. Sometimes it's just like people get really attached to them, like wow, everyone really loves this character. That's a good sign that we should keep this one.
Right.
And then sometimes it's like, well, this one has a combat potential that, in its concept that no one else has, so we should keep that. And when it came to like executing on these characters, that was the real challenge, because there's I'm less interested in realism in games and in writing, not even in games, in writing, and I'm more interested in authenticity. And I want these characters to be authentic. And there are some guidelines that you have. You talked earlier about Saints Row having this kind of anything goes feel to it.
Yeah.
But really, it's not, right? There are rules. The magic trick is that people think anything goes, but actually there are rules.
Right.
And it's the same with Agents of Mayhem, and part of that was determining the rules with a new IP, especially because there's studio history, but there's no IP history, there's no world history. So one of the things that for me had to be absolutely fundamental when it came to executing on these characters are some basic rules, right? Like that, like their ethnicity, their sexuality, their identity. None of this is the butt of a joke. It's never the joke. We're making a comedy game, but these people are not the punchline. Like it's the situations they find themselves in. It's the it's how they react and the different ways they react. It's Daisy running headfirst into danger, and Hollywood's like, "Whoa, no, nobody hit me in the face." And it's about, you have this cast of characters, and you want, like, we would say that, like, we fail if everyone loves all the characters, right? Because if we do, then we're probably playing too safe. We want people to really love some characters, and it's okay if you don't absolutely adore other ones, because other people are going to love those characters. And keeping that in mind of, like, every one of these characters we have is going to be someone's favorite. Like, don't do this character a disservice. Don't do that person who loves this character a disservice. Be authentic. Be authentic about what this character is, their background, the background we've decided on, the dreams they are fulfilling. Whether it's just the fact that they are a proxy for someone, or it's because of, wow, there's someone from, Germany. I like playing a German person. Here's this, or whether it is like the combat role that they have, right? You don't ever want to kick the stool out from under these characters.
Right.
Did I
Yeah,
answer the question though?
Yeah. No, that was a great. That was a great
that was
answer.
a great answer.
That was great.
Yeah, but since we're talking about characters, you worked on Saints Row and other things. I was wondering, for someone who maybe is knowledgeable about Saints Row, loves Saints Row, and knows about Agents of Mayhem. One, do you have to have a lot of knowledge about Saints Row to kind of dive into Mayhem? And is there any connection between the two worlds?
I don't know anything about the Saints Row world at all to jump in Agents of Mayhem. Yes, it's part of the larger Saints Row universe, but no foreknowledge is needed. If
Okay.
you have it, then you are rewarded with various Easter eggs.
Nice.
That you'll know going into it, like, oh, Pierce Washington. And it was funny because coming into Saints Row, Pierce was my favorite character. And he was always the butt of the jokes. And so it's like when it was decided we were going to bring Pierce into Agents of Mayhem, it's like, well, no, we're going to make him awesome. Because this is the alternate reality where Pierce is awesome. So there are things like that. And there are, there are lines, voice lines, and there are even some gadgets in that are callbacks to the Saints Row franchise. But nothing. No, it's people who have never played any Volition game at all can jump at Agents of Mayhem.
Nice.
Awesome. I'm a big Saints Row fan, so I'm eager to dive into this. If not tonight, then definitely tomorrow morning.
Awesome. So good.
Nice. So I guess the question I have for you is, people do have very interesting memories of that previous franchise and series. Of course, because the same teams or parts of the same team are making this game, there's going to be, like we said, some crossover. Do you feel like this game is kind of the evolution of both the genre that game is kind of in, and also, do you feel like there and now, because we're going for this kind of really smart and snarky as hell kind of world that is it feels even more like running towards the line a little bit of like good crass, which you know what I mean, which is like really fun and snarky and a little bit kind of dickish in a lot of ways. Do you feel like there are even some lines that you're like, all right, so we want to bring ourselves fully into this, but we don't want to hit or get to this line where we may either offend or the jokes may not hit in the way that we want to. How's that as a writer, kind of trying to figure out how you kind of mitigate getting in the fun jokes, but also in a world where some jokes don't hit? How do you feel like you can mitigate that stuff and have a game that people will still kind of enjoy?
Yeah, I mean, you hit on a big thing with humor. I've talked before about drama is easy. Right. You can kill a dog, you can give a young mother breast cancer, and people are like, oh man, wow. Like there's that drama is easy because there's kind of a shared universe of pain.
Right.
Humor, who knows, man? Like humor is one of the hardest things, especially since and it's not like we're writing stuff over lunch and then we're, I'm at the open mic night at the Chuckle Hut delivering these lines to a live audience, right? It's like we are.
Shout out to the Chuckle Hut.
Yeah, shout out to the Chuckle Hut. I'll be there next Tuesday. No, but you're trying to predict where things are at, like years ahead. Like where's the zeitgeist going to be?
Right.
And you're right. Like we as like the American culture, especially the larger media culture of sitcoms and stuff like that, like we're moving towards a very kind of it's almost postmodern, but there's definitely like snarky, right? Like we're aware of the jokes, we're in on the jokes, and it's like I get it, and that's cool. That's a good sense. That's fine. It's funny, but like I think I am earnest to a fault. I'm definitely a heart on the sleeve type person, and so for me, that's kind of where the humor comes from. But that's also why I don't write all the characters. because we have 12 playable agents in the box. All of them have different viewpoints, right? So you have the kind of the like people who are like me, who are hard on the sleeve, but you also have people with really dark gallows humor. You have people
Right.
who are just kind of oblivious. They're kind of like the Joey Tribbiani archetype of just like the what? I don't know. Look, whatever. Let's just go. And shout out to Hollywood. And then you have like the person like the dog, the hyper dog that's just like pulling against the leash. It's like Red Car. Like Red Car's just like just let me chase the cars.
Right.
And so you get to have all these different characters who explore the world with their own sense of humor and their own perspective. And of course, they're thrown into ridiculous situations. That's what Legion's there for. Legion's there to be like, here's a really really dumb roundabout way of thinking the world. Let's try it. And Mayhem's job is to stop them. So the Legion creates the ridiculous situation, and then the different agents approach it their own way, and that's where the humor comes from. And I think rooting the humor in the motivations of the characters gives it a little bit of a universality and a little bit of an agelessness, where you don't have to worry about like, oh, are we trying to strike on the what's funny now, right? Because we've kind of been telling the same jokes for, at least in sitcoms, for like 100 years. They're pretty much the same, playbook, but we're wrapping them differently,
right?
And putting different spins on them. And I think that's the approach we took with Agents of Mayhem. Was it's we try to be smart. I think some people think of the Saints Row humor as pretty dumb, but it's smarter, I think, than people give it credit for. And with Agents of Mayhem, we try to do that too. It's not like smarter than thou, but it's smart, it's funny, it's authentic, it's rooted in the characters and the crazy situations. So, and for me, it was the important thing of like, let's not chase any trend, because the trend will have passed by the time this game hits shelves. So let's just stick with something that's timeless and funny, and trust that we are good enough to do it differently enough that it doesn't seem like a retread.
So does that mean that there's no dabs in the game? No one is dabbing in this game? There are negative dabs in Agent of Mayhem?
Not the game. 100%. I guarantee you my son is dabbing right now.
He's in mid-dab watching his dad on screen right now.
Constant dabbing. I'm worried. Yeah, no.
Is that some emote?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Oh.
That is hilarious.
People bring up like memes all the time too, right? Like a meme will hit and people will be like, "Oh, we gotta put this in the game." And I'm like, "Do you understand? No. By the time you sent me this email, the meme was dead." Right? Like maybe in 5 years we'll bring the meme back, but right now it's dead.
Yeah. Yes. So I love that you mentioned the fact that there were 12 agents in this game, because obviously, there's kind of 3 that you've kind of seen on a lot of the material that's like been out. And I'm really curious to say, did you have sort of all 12 designed out with the ideas and like kind of said, all right, these are the 3 that we want to kind of represent and kick off, that represent all that the game is? Or like, did you kind of start with this core 3 that you knew were it, and then kind of added on until you got to like a 12 at the end?
The 3 kind of shook out naturally. Part of the lineup, and we talked a lot about the intro of the game, the tutorial, like how are we can't just give people 12 characters, and we can't just give them like pick one of these 12 people. That's too much, right? It's paralysis. So it was like, well, we're gonna have to give them we need to teach them the basic gameplay, right? We also need to teach them things like the agent switching mechanic. So we eventually need to give them an initial squad. So who is that squad? And Hollywood, by design, is the blandly handsome 30-year-old white male game protagonist, right? He is, that is exactly what he is intended to be.
I love it. He is, that's so good.
I mean, I name him, but come on. I remember a magazine article that talked about like the top protagonists, top video game protagonists of the year, and it was just like Brady Bunch matrix with the same face.
Yeah.
And it's like I've never been so tired of seeing my own face. And so like that was him by design. So he is a good entry point character because he runs the midline. He's still like his mayhem ability where he calls in Michael Bay explosions and that help push him over, but he's a really good entry point character. So once you have that, it's like, okay, well, Hollywood's going to be how people get into the game. It's like, well, we still need 2 members of the squad. Who makes sense? Well, Fortune's fast. She's got 2 pistols. You know, she's comes to us from Rio de Janeiro, but she is Colombian. And it's like, okay, and then there's Hardtack. Hardtack's our tank, right? Big bulky guy. It's like he's got the shotgun. So they just kind of shook out naturally of like who's a good team. And then, you know, because they were going to be the first team that you played, they end up becoming you know, it made sense that they'd be the first team we'd put out for press and stuff like that at E3 16. And yeah, they just end up being they call themselves in the game, they call themselves Franchise Force.
Yeah.
Franchise Force? Oh,
Franchise
great.
Force. Hollywood came up
scene.
with it. He thinks it's, I don't think, Persephone is not a fan, the boss, the head of Mayhem. She's not a fan of that, but she lets him.
See, I kind of see now that I know that these are like the analogs that we have going on in the game. Like Hollywood is like the Ryan Seacrest with a gun. Then
oh my god!
Because then it makes me think of like people who I want to see as analogs in the game. Like I want a Stephen A. Smith in the game who basically he doesn't have a gun. He just shouts real loud at people. And then he's like, he just shouts and then like cars blow up and all this other stuff.
Oh, that'd be so good.
Oh, it'd be so good. He would just start off real low and then he would just get real angry for no reason. And then that would be his superpower. It would be his alt. One of the things I really love about the game, one of the things that first kind of drew me into it was how many dope female characters this game has. And it's full of really strong women who have a multitude of both moves and backgrounds. What was the conversation in with the team talking about how you wanted to kind of even bring that up in part of the marketing and kind of the strategy of sharing those folks out kind of front and center?
Oh man, yeah. Thank you. Because it was important, man. It was important to with this group to do everyone right. And so I love the cast, especially the women of Agents of Mayhem. Really, when it came to like getting them right, it was just again being authentic, doing the homework, but being very real about like these are characters. These are characters who are independent and strong on their own. Like, and we have a tendency, we being culture, especially writers in TV and books and that, to define women by their relationships, by the other people in their life. And this is like no, like it's for me, it's a no-brainer of like no, these people are themselves their own. First and foremost, they have relationships because we're an ensemble cast, but they are strong and on their own, which thankfully Evolution, that's accepted. You know, it's like, oh yeah, of course. I'm like, oh, I had a whole argument planned. Never mind. And people, you know, they have characters like Rama, who I think just looks amazing. I think her, you know, she named herself after the mythical bowman, and her whole design is just gorgeous. And so she became just like the way she looked. You know, Fortune was part of Franchise Force. Daisy, people love because she's so brash. Yeah, people were drawn to those characters, and you know, I love hearing that they connect because it was really, really important to me to get them right.
Okay, I don't actually have a question. I just want to give Kyle some grief for a second.
Oh God, no! What did I do?
Wait, so part of me joining the show was about having a female perspective, and you just like sniped that question right from under me.
But wait, hold on. See, that's the thing though. I don't want you to only be the female perspective on our show, because then I'll be whacking sexist of me.
Yeah, but that's not even a good save. You got to do better.
Oh, damn! That's a diversity question.
I'm staying out of this.
It got
I'm
crapped
staying
off for asking
out
a
of
diversity
this.
question. This
You've
is
known me for how long?
this is yeah. See, that's your alt. Your alt was to hit me in the ass.
We should start a separate podcast while they settle this out. They should let
No, I'm just
Podcast and a podcast.
That's right.
I just like giving Kahlief a hard time, but I just had to laugh at it. I was sitting going, did he just ask this question?
My bad. My fault. Wait. Well, so.
But since we're talking about female characters, though.
Yeah.
I mean, and if you can talk about it, because I know some places don't or can't talk about the makeup of their writing staff. What's your ratio of men to women, non-binary, people of color actually working on this game and giving us all these female characters?
So over the course of the 4 years, because we've had interns and we've had temp writers and we've had writers get hired and leave, we have had, let me some counting, we've had 4 women writing. One was a temp writer. We had 2 interns, and then we have a staff writer who's a woman. The rest have been male. Of that, there was one. There was one of the writers is asexual. One of the writers is lesbian, and all white. Welcome to the Great Plains. It was. That's honestly, it's a whole other conversation. The kind of self-fulfilling prophecy of excluding in media and therefore limiting in your talent pool, right? Because when you're excluding people, but when they're not present in the things you are creating, you're not welcoming them as people into the fan base, much less into the creative pool. But that's where we were at.
Cool.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
So
better than average, and trying.
Work.
Yeah, so like given that that of those 3 main characters, one is African American and one is Colombian. Is it, since you sort of didn't have those groups within your team, what are some of the challenges that you guys had to overcome to really deliver on those characters? Because I know that one thing I hear a lot from other companies or like the industry in general is that we can't write diverse characters because we don't have a diverse staff.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm always curious to like hear about some of the how like you guys basically dealt with that.
Yeah, I hear the same, and it's like I am the person I am. I have the experience of life I have. If I'm going to be a writer, though, I've got to write from other perspectives. All my characters can't just be me, right? So it's on me to learn as much as I can, and when I'm creating a character, and it goes back to that authenticity, right? Like dig deep. Don't again, their identity is not the source of the identity is not the character, right? No matter what you identify as, I think you have there is things deeper inside of all of us than what we project, and probably even what the words we would use to identify ourselves. And so like with Fortune, it's like I have quite a few friends of Hispanic descent, and and not just I have a good friend of mine who's Cuban American, first generation. His parents came over from Cuba. I have a friend of mine who came, who's Mexican, came over to America when he was very young. I had neighbors from Ecuador. Where I lived previously in Madison, Wisconsin, my neighbors were from Ecuador, and so I've had occasion in my life to listen, and observe, and I observe the way, in a predominantly white area like Madison, Wisconsin, the all these people from Ecuador, people from Puerto Rico, people from Mexico, all of that because they had some part of their identity that they shared, right? They would congregate, and so it'd be interesting to go like to my daughter was friends with.
Looks like we might have lost Jason for a second. We'll see if his Skype chat catches up.
Yeah, he might come back. He might come back.
Yeah. So
it's all that pro streaming. It's all that pro streaming.
yeah, it happens. So while this is happening in the background, what we'll do is we just lost him, so we'll snag him again in a second. If one of you can add him back to the call, that would be dope.
Sure.
Yeah.
You got it, Shrew?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So first of all, I guess let's see how all the stuff is working in the chat. How's everybody digging all the stuff going live? We'll see how that's going.
Yeah, exactly. That's the main thing. I'm interested in how the audio quality, how's the video quality.
Yeah.
And
Now
just
we're
how
all
you guys
messed
like the
up.
pace of the show.
It's okay. I'll fix it in a minute.
Which is like, since we lost someone, we're all messed up.
Yeah, this is what happens when you learn how to do it. Oh,
Live shows.
Live shows.
We're all pros. We're all pros, y'all.
So hopefully when he comes back into the room, it'll even itself back out. So now what you can do is you can actually look and see the top of Reef's head, which is great. That's cool.
I know, right?
Hey, I mean,
Malvin said I was cut off.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Hello?
I'm a head
Hi.
model, so it's okay.
You have returned.
Yeah,
Yeah.
although Sharif.
Sorry about that.
No, it's totally
no.
okay.
Okay.
It's totally
It's all
okay.
good, man.
Your microphone's
I'm in a basement.
is a little bit loud.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Just keep recording on the back end though. Keep the actual the local record going.
Yeah, I didn't anything.
No worries.
I'm back.
No worries. I'm sure you had a really long, elaborate question that you just answered, and we got 90% of it.
Yeah, and so there you go. That's my entire reasoning. It's absolutely bulletproof. It's the best possible answer you could have thought of, right? Like, so.
Yeah, no, I'm just glad that you brought up Madison because like I live in Milwaukee and
Oh yeah.
and like I head over to Madison every once in a while, so I can definitely agree with your assessment of the diversity there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Diversity and Madison don't go in the same sentence.
it's all
Yeah, I
the cold,
said it.
the cold drains all the color from you is really what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, that joke was bad. I apologize.
No, it's
No, it's
totally
not.
fine. No, it's totally fine.
The joke was bad.
No, it's
No,
totally fine.
and I think you got the majority of the question that I was asking, but if you just wanted to just wrap up the answer on the
Yeah,
challenges
the real
of
thing is it's observe. It's observe, right? Like, don't be afraid to ask questions. Open up your worldview, and observe. It's only going to do you good to do that as a person and as a creative. To part of it is like observe without feeling like you need to understand right away, right? You need to figure out like why though, like just observe and understand that that's how it is.
Yeah.
That's how these interactions go. That's how the cultures are, and realize that it's okay to know something is without having to break it down into all the bits and pieces and understand and make sure that it makes sense to you, that you can just accept.
Cool. So last question that we have for you before we let you go.
Sure.
One of the things that I'm always interested in hearing from folks who are writers on games, especially ones that have this huge canvas and landscape that you can kind of dig through, and multiple branching characters and huge stories that are probably going to get DLC and get all this other content. How do you build a story with 12 characters, multiple baddies, all these other folks that are in there, plus being able to tackle most of these missions in various ways that are just up to your liking and up to your imagination. How hard is it to make games of this magnitude?
Really hard. And even if you had the entire thing planned out from day one, it's
Right.
incredibly hard to execute on
Mm,
on the idea. And now you have to work in, you have to account for the fact that your best ideas are not the ones you had on day one. You're going to have better ideas later on that you weigh them, about like, is it worth executing on this, right? Versus like the work it would take, right? But a lot of them are like, yeah, it is. So let's find a place for that. And then it's other people's ideas coming in, and then it's just like, oh, this thing we thought we could do, we can't do, because you're working with tech. It's video games, so that means there are technical limitations. That there are memory limitations. There are tool set limitations, engine limitations, platform limitations. So you're just like, oh well, we can't do that. But so much of it was already built, maybe from an asset perspective, or everything leading up to it and everything coming off of it was built. So and something new that fits into this, right? And it's really hard. Video games are, man, it takes a whole lot of people a whole long time to build things that are this big. And we are, you know, we're a smaller studio, and we're competing in the open world space. And a lot of the other people in that space, UB and that are like, they're huge. They're huge. But at the end of the day, right, it doesn't matter. It's still the gamer is spending the same $60, and they choose. Am I going to give $60 to this game or $60 to that game?
right.
So we have to find ways to be smart about how we do this stuff, and that just compounds the difficulty because video games, man, video games.
Absolutely.
Whew, yeah.
It's hard. It's hard out here for a video game writer, especially trying to figure out how to make all these wonderful things that we get to enjoy. We're gonna let you go. Again, thank you so much for being a part of the show this week. Let folks know where they can find more of your work, especially in the game. Let folks know where they can find the game when it's coming out, and all the platforms that they'll be able to partake in it with.
Agents of Mayhem is coming out on PC, PS4, and Xbox One in the US on Tuesday, August 15th, and then in the UK UK and Europe, I guess, on August 18th. You can go to aomthegame.com, AOM the Game on all the social media. If you care about me, Jason L. Blair on Twitter, jasonlblair.com. But the game is far more interesting than I am.
Awesome. Jason, thank you again so much for coming
thank you.
this evening and dealing with all our shenanigans on our first Twitch stream, which is fantastic. So you did a fantastic job.
Thank you. I had an absolute blast. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course.
That's awesome.
If you want to come back on, you want any other folks to come back on, and if you get Ryan Seacrest with a gun, we'll have him on so you can talk to him.
Oh, yeah.
Oh
Let me know.
I
need to talk to Ryan. First off, he owes me money. And second, I want to see what's it feel like to be the model for so many aspiring game protagonists.
So many bland ass dudes. Yeah,
Wow.
Absolutely. All right, Riccardo, we are going to take about a 4-minute break. We're going to get some water. We're going to go. I'm going to wipe all the sweat because it's hot as hell in this room. Sweet Jesus. And we'll be right back. Everybody, we are back. Thank you so much for hanging out and waiting for us to get into the show again and doing all that cool stuff. Shout out to Jason. Jason was fantastic hanging out with us from the team over at Volition. As you can see, it is hot as hell in my room. I have this computer here, and it's so hot, I'm sweating. It's like runaway slave sweat. I don't know what to do. I can't help it. I can't help it. I don't know what's happening here. But I do want to thank everybody for sticking around. And again, like this is our first show, so we're trying to figure it all out in real time. And I think it's working pretty well. Like I think we're doing a pretty okay job making it happen. Reef was like, whatever, dude. He was like, you suck at life. Cool. Yeah, this stuff that I have to figure out and make happen, but it's all good. It's all good. We're figuring it out. One of the cool things we like to do if you are new to the show is we like to talk about news of the week. We like to dig into some of the stories that have been popping up in the gaming universe, and there were a lot of different things that were in there that was kind of rough around the edges for a lot of folks. Let's see if we can figure out, what those things were.
You can't hear me at all?
No, I think we got you. You're good.
We can hear you, but the chat is saying they can't.
Yeah, I think we got you back. Yeah, you should be good.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I've got an echo though from somebody.
Oh, you do? That's weird. Huh. Interesting. Maybe the chat is up somewhere else.
There we go.
No, they said she's back.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so
thanks, Logitech.
Logitech is a hater. Logitech would be hating.
Hey,
but we would love to have you as sponsors on the Spawn
let's not kill our potential sponsors.
We'd love
I'm
to
not
have you
killing
as sponsors. One of the interesting and not great stories of the week, if you've been following the drama that's been coming out of Polygon this past week with Nick Robinson and the conversation around sexual harassment. That some questions came up about his professionalism at the job last week or so, and folks were digging into the conversation about him kind of putting out advances to folks through Twitter and social media and that kind of stuff. There was a fantastic kind of not overview, but a fantastic conversation that happened over at Waypoint this week. On Waypoint Radio, where Patrick Klepek and Austin Walker and Danielle, they all had a lot of really interesting things to talk about in terms of power dynamics and what happened. And that then came out today. The information came out today, as of Thursday is the time that we're recording this, is that Nick Robinson has now been let go from Polygon. So the conversation I want to have is, one, what do we think about, the incident that happened, and then also, how Polygon kind of dealt with it. Tanya, I want to talk and jump to you first. What do you think about how they kind of handled everything and what, the conversation was entailing both, in our circles and on the internet?
On Polygon, on Waypoint, they really got into it, and I think Polygon, the EIC there handled it as best he could, because that's a shitty position to be in, and not everybody knows what's going on, not everybody knows kind of the deal. I didn't know of this until I heard about the news breaking, so even though we kind of run in the same circles, some of it is all news to me.
Right.
And, it's hard because, when you got friends that are talking about it and, they know the deal, they know, or this dude has approached them and they're dealing with this. It's hard because you want to be supportive, you want to be there for your friends, but you also don't have all the details.
Right.
But the main thing is, remember, women and non-binary folks and other folks that are being harassed don't make up these things just because.
Right.
And we always get into the blaming the victim mentality. We always get into the, well, he's a good guy or he didn't do it to me, which is all bullshit. I think Polygon did what they had to do, because honestly, if they'd kept this dude on, that's going to show them being, inconsiderate of the people he's harassed. And if they do keep him on, who's going to want to work with this dude? Who's going to want to record video with him? Who's going to want to talk to him? And if they don't, they're doing what they got to do to protect their business, because at the end of the day, Polygon's a business.
Right.
And I read through the tweets. I saw the announcement. I saw his bullshit apology.
That was such a bad apology too.
That was a bad apology. That was a bullshit apology
that
of
was
all.
Really
that was the
bad.
non-apology of all non-apologies. But they got to protect themselves. They're a business. At the end of the day, they're thinking about money. One dude was not going to be worth all the lawsuits and shit they were going to get. It's on his Twitter. Someone in the chat is asking. So they did what they had to do, because, like the Google dude, who's going to want to work with this guy ever again?
Right.
Maybe he'll grow up and learn from it. Maybe he won't. But you know what? He should have been doing it in the first fucking place.
Yeah. Yeah. It's rough. It's rough. Reef, what are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, I think, I agree with Tanya in that, like Polygon, they seem to, do what I don't see is done a lot of times when this kind of harassment is like reported, is they immediately jumped on it. They held a quick investigation and they suspended him while they were doing that. And then they, obviously were overwhelmed by the evidence and like let him go. Like, I feel like usually when you hear this kind of stuff, it's like kind of this, well, we don't really believe you. We got to hear from more people, and it has to go through all these other channels, and it becomes this long drawn out kind of thing where the victims have to come out, and then they become like relive, like the stuff that they had to go through. So I did like the speed that this happens. One thing that does bother me though is that a lot of people that I've seen and heard talk about this, they've all said like, yeah, like we've been hearing this stuff for a long time about this guy. And I'm like, so nobody, like, I guess no one's really said anything.
Okay,
because,
sure. Let me jump in real quick.
Sure,
I won't be that person.
No, go ahead.
The problem with that idea is that people have been whispering or back channeling. We see what happens to people who come forward. We see what happens when you're that person, the only one who can talk about it, and if nobody has your back, you're out there hanging in the wind, and
Right.
then you become the bitter person, whatever adjectives people want to come through with, and a lot of times people come forward. Either one of two things happen, either other people come forward and go, "Hey, me too," or they let this person get hung out to dry and then come out and say something. They let court of public opinion, they let everyone else go after this one person who's already been screwed over by everyone else, by people they thought may have had their back. They become, this unwitting icon. And if they're not a perfect victim, quote unquote, then, they either get swept under the carpet, and depending on that other person's presence, I mean, look at what happened with Bill Cosby. Look at all this other. Look at every harassment case and rape case that we see that gets put in the public. And as far as I know, it didn't. I don't know if it went as far as physical assault, but that one person who comes forward, basically a lot of women just talk to each other. We're like, that dude, don't be in a room with him. Don't be on a panel with him. Don't talk to him.
Right.
So I mean, that's what that is. It's not a matter of just nobody wants to be brave. You have to be ready to ruin your career and your life for a while.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point, and like, thanks for adding that perspective. Because I didn't think it was that people weren't being brave. I was just bothered by the fact that people like him can exist freely, even with it being out there, because of the reasons that you gave. That you got to be willing to risk a lot to prove someone else did something wrong. Like it's just like it's just a sign that some things in the world that we live in are just not right. And it was also weird the way this came out, because I was kind of looking at the background of this, and this really came out because he posted a review about the Overcooked port for the Nintendo Switch, which has had not all kind of issues, but it definitely had some like issues.
Right.
And then people just started sharing back to him like, yeah, well, like if you weren't in like everybody's DMs all the time, maybe you could help them fix it. And then it kind of blew up from there. So it was almost like people were holding this in for all this time, and they just had that like avenue, and then things just steamrolled. I mean, I just wish that when people started doing this kind of stuff, that there was a system where people could come forward and not have to, as you said, like risk all this stuff, because I feel like he's probably been doing this for a long time and has been, being able to enjoy the status of being, like a very popular content creator at a high ranked site. It's just, it just bothers me that's the environment that we're in.
The environment.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Tanya. No. Keep going, Tanya.
No, I was just gonna say that environment it's in sci-fi and fantasy literature worlds. It's in gaming. It's, we also had the week of the Google Manifesto. So this ain't nothing new.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things that actually really bothered me about the whole incident was afterwards. There were folks who were fans of Nick Robinson, and I've come across him, at shows, and we haven't really ever had a discussion or talked, but I've seen him from time to time. And the conversation in his fandom and in his circles was like, well, this was a mistake, and we understand that you're young and all this other stuff. And I was like, dude is almost 30. Like, you don't get there's this interesting conversation about how we infantilize a lot of people who are grown-ass people, who are like adults, and just because they have this kind of image of being, young in some of that ways, that it's like it's a pass that people get. That thing is really annoying, and I hate it. It's so bad. So people are like, well, you'll be fine, and which you probably will. He'll probably find another job in somewhere in the industry, and he'll be fine. And I'm not saying that he should be blackballed, but I think that he needs to go to therapy. Like, that's a thing you definitely got to go and check on that and get that stuff fixed. Shout out to Nani J. Cool in the chat about that particular comment that she just dropped. But I do think it's one of those things where we have to then hold people's feet to the fire, and also, like Reef said, figure out ways that we can actually do and have really blunt conversation about how we figure out that people are having these conversations and that are super just not okay. And give people the space to be able to come forward and talk about those things that are happening to them, and not feel like they have to kind of hide in a hole and hope that other people can advocate for them so that they can get the help that they need to get away from creepy people like that. So yeah, it's a really interesting thing. I don't know how the gaming industry is going to either rally behind him or not, but I do think that the conversation with all the Google Manifesto stuff and this happening in the same week, it is interesting to see people show their ass as usual and come to the defense of people who don't deserve, who did indefensible things. So
yeah, and the manifesto thing is crazy because obviously the dude that wrote that manifesto at Google was saying that one of the reasons that things are not diverse is because of these biological differences, and it's like, no, it's because people don't want to deal with this kind of like shit where they, where people like Nick, and I'm sure he's not the only, by far not the only one, like other folks that are basically allowed to run rampant with this kind of stuff, like without, and there's a system that, supports and reemphasizes and that people can't come forward. So it's just like, and now that guy that wrote that manifesto is like, I was looking at, he has a Twitter account and all these conservative accounts are like retweeting him. And like,
isn't that the way though? Isn't that always the way that the kind of thing goes? Is like, dude says really terrible shit, then gets fired from company. Hopefully, usually they don't get fired, but now gets fired. Then that whole conversation happens on the internet, Twitter and Reddit and all those other places. Then immediately those folks run to whatever conservative alt-right channel and those folks are like waiting. It's like open arms of just like, bring your shittiness to us. We will take all your shittiness and pet it and be happy about it. It's such a weird phenomena, but
it's not a phenomenon, it's a script. And step 2 is somebody's gonna set up a GoFundMe for him some fundraising, because poor him, he lost his job. Fuck that dude.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel you.
Yeah, you can't do that. That's not dope. You just can't have that stuff. And I have to give kudos to Polygon for taking the proper steps, suspending him first, and then letting him go in that way. I think it was the only kind of recourse that you could have at this point, and I feel like they did what they were supposed to do, and that was good. I'm happy that. Any last thoughts on the Nick Robinson incident?
I hope he can grow up and get better, but damage is done, and in this day and age, that is lightning quick. You can say some shit that's not even that terrible, let alone what he's done, and you can be ruined. But he's a white dude. He will bounce back in a couple years. He'll be EIC at some site, or the alt-right, or somebody's going to snatch him up and coddle him and tell him those SJWs are so terrible. How dare they mistreat him? And he's going to buy into that ideology, and he's going to be the same one with a Patreon getting 10 G's a month to make videos for 90 minutes hollering about feminists.
Don't.
I can't add anything to that. I think
there's nothing. And cut. Yeah.
That's the show.
That's the end of the show. Thank you all for coming.
It's not really the show. Don't leave.
No, don't leave yet. Don't leave yet.
I mean, that's real though. Like, it's super depressing, but that's real. That is real.
Hate, man. Hate gets a lot of funds online, man. Folks
like
just
Twitter.
And I want to do the anti-hater GoFundMe so that we just have a pool of stuff for good people that they just divvy it up and give it out instead of all that stuff.
Not even the chat said that Nick Robinson is going to be dating Lacey Green in a week.
Wow.
That's pretty funny.
Wow.
That ain't no lie.
Sweet baby Jesus.
I wish we could laugh about it, but give it a month.
I'm not even going to get into that whole thing. That'll be a whole other show that is not about video games. But some folks that you should support, folks that you should give some love to, other folks over at Fullbright. Their game Tacoma just came out, which I have to recuse myself from some of the conversation because I was lucky enough to work with them on the launch of the game, and I'm still actually working with them on the launch of their game. But I will say, the game is fucking awesome. You should go buy that joint and go play it. I know that Tanya, you had some time with the game of late. You want to jump into some of your thoughts about what you've played so far?
It's an interesting game. It's very well. I almost said animated. That's not the right word. It's well put together. I find the intrigue of kind of putting together what's happened on this station an interesting mechanic. But unfortunately for me, the game about 2 hours in gave me quite a bit of motion sickness. And that's after turning off the head bob and kind of dampening down the field of occlusion, all those other things that can contribute to it. But I do want to go back and finish the game because, it's interesting because without giving too much away, you basically you put together memories and you have to hit notes in those memories to figure out the story. And I like that kind of stuff versus the obscure-ass puzzles where you're like, I got to go find some random key that's like 10 leagues away that I may never find. And so I really like it. Hopefully they can either do something or take feedback about the first-person view and kind of the movement causing motion sickness. Some games are addressing that. That would be my one little nitpick about it, but it could also just be me. I'm loving it though. I wish it was a little more clear though. Kind of like, okay, I'm on the space station. I got to wander around and get clues. Why am I there? Did I come out of cryo? Kind of like what's going on? And there's just this air of melancholy, like you're putting together a kind of final log, and you're just finding out what happened. Now, this is me saying it after playing just 2 hours. I haven't finished it, so hopefully I can go back and figure out what the story is. Cool.
Reef, did you have a chance to mess around with Tacoma at all?
I did. I had a chance to play a bit of it, and there's a couple things that immediately struck out to me. One is the art design. I feel like it's a very unique looking game. I feel like a lot of space games really go for more of the sort of gritty, dirty space that was kind of popularized in like Star Wars and like that stuff. But I feel like the only game I think really didn't do that was like No Man's Sky. And I think that this game kind of like shares like those similar vibes of like trying to make a game about being in a space station, but not have it look like the millions of other space stations that we've seen throughout the years of like sci-fi on like TV and in movies. So I really like sort of like the uniqueness of the space. Like I did feel like I was in a new space that I had not already been in the millions of other movies that I've seen. I also think that it's a really good use of color.
Yeah.
And I know that that's something that was like kind of in the original kind of trailers, but I think it really pops in the actual game. I mean, this is a game that just really does a good job with not only the bright colors, but like the gradients and like the alternating hues. Whereas like most games really only use that to like, to like signal like an objective or like a drop. This just uses it as part of the general space. So like it was like really pleasing. It was like sending all the proper endorphins to my Reefy brain.
Can you please not talk about your endorphins with other people in the room, please?
My endorphins are dope.
Ew.
Yeah, and I just, I mean, I think that the one thing that, sort of like the common thought that I saw floating around about this game for the last few months is like, is this going to be Gone Home in space?
Right.
And I do think that, I mean, my favorite parts about Gone Home weren't necessarily putting the sort of mainline puzzle together. It was just like going in and looking at like, oh, these books are pretty cool on this shelf. And like, just like seeing how they laid out like these rooms and exactly like how they made it look like a livable, breathable space. And I do feel that same way in this game. So I feel like that they had that same attention to detail, and that same kind of like, like we're going to put all this work into this section, even if there are some players that'll just run through and not really pay attention to it. Like I feel like it really rewards the kind of play style that I like to do, which is stop, look around, maybe go to like this part here, even if there's, something else that I quote unquote should be doing.
Right.
So yeah, so like my initial impressions are great. Like it definitely sucked me in. And I also like that it's advertised as kind of a shorter game. I've been playing a lot of longer games as of late, and like it's like good to know that I can kind of, have like a shorter experience that is hopefully like as fulfilling and meaty, as like some of the longer experiences that I've had. So I'm super hyped after my first bit.
Yeah, and since you brought up books, Sharif, one cool thing I did notice was all the actual books in the characters' quarters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
Like Nnedi Okorafor, Margaret Atwood.
I love that stuff.
Well, and it was interesting because Carolyn Pettit, shout out to Carolyn Pettit at Feminist Frequency, told me that there's an homage to N.K. Jemisin in the game. And I found that, but I'm not 100% sure it's supposed to be her because it's Nikki Jemisin.
Oh, really?
So
interesting.
There's a poster, and I'll tweet out a picture. I'll tweet out a screenshot after we're done. It looks like, it doesn't even look like Nora, so it was kind of like, okay, is this supposed to be her? And I'm looking for her books everywhere. So, she's like, Jemison's actually kind of a common name in certain parts of the world.
That's interesting.
So yeah, I was just like, I found it, but I'm not 100% convinced it's a direct homage to Nora, which is kind of weird because I know her, so I'm like, that doesn't look like her.
That ain't her. That ain't her.
Which they probably didn't get permission to use her name or image. So if it is an homage, yay! Thanks, Fullbright. But she was just kind of like, everyone keeps telling me about this, and I don't know, and she can't play it because she didn't have a PC. So
yeah, it's the thing that Fullbright gets done really well is attention to detail, like Reef was talking about. I was watching some walkthroughs before the game went live, and they were just talking about, like food on the tables and in the cabinets, and how each one of them was very specific and done really well. Like you go into the bathroom and there's like a bar of space soap, and it's like fully rendered and like has all the ingredients and stuff on it and all that stuff on it. So it's again like attention to detail and building a story around really interesting characters was the thing that brought me into wanting to play it and into the project, and also the fact that it was like a video game version of Sleep No More automatically made me want to get into that world. So if folks have not tried Tacoma, definitely go out and try it. I think you should buy it. I think you should purchase it. It's worth your money. And I'm not just saying that because I worked on it, but I think that those folks definitely deserve a lot of your love if you like really cool narrative-based experiences. So check out Tacoma. We'll have some links in the show notes if you don't know where to go get it, and we'll be able to do that. Speaking of games that you should be checking out as well, and kind of the conversations around them, an interesting conversation, at least from what Reef put in our docket, and also an article that was on Waypoint, shout out to them as well, is the conversation around Hellblade, this game that came out from the folks over at Ninja Theory. If you're not familiar with their work, they made Heavenly Sword on the PS3, which was like a landmark title for numerous reasons. It was one of the most beautiful games that they had on the platform to begin as a launch title, and they were really well known for their facial capture. Andy Serkis was in that game in the beginning. Doing motion capture for it, and kind of helped push the medium forward. Besides the game itself, there's a conversation around this price point that we find a fairly, I would consider Hellblade a AAA game, and I think a lot of people would, just because of the fidelity that you see. But I do think that the conversation around, like, is the $30 market a thing that we're going to see as a trend happening? We see it with Hellblade. We see it with Lawbreakers. Fortnite is kind of in that range too. Reef, what do you think about the kind of $30 model as being something that might be something that we see going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the multiple price points were always there. I think like the challenge is making a game with the fidelity that you see in a Hellblade and a Lawbreakers for that price.
Right.
Because I feel like that the justification that, I think that we've all kind of just taken as fact is that, games are $60 because games are super duper expensive to make, and they need to price it that much and still sell millions and millions of units for it to be a success. So I feel like we've kind of accepted that, that's what games need to be, unless we want them to look and be lesser than they are, Mm-hmm. But I do think that those games that, like you mentioned, are they're like throwing some like holes in that theory. Now, I do think that you do need to be sort of a more established studio, like a Ninja Theory, and obviously Boss Key is kind of, they're like new, but like obviously Cliff has been around for a while in the industry. So I do think that once you sort of build up that name and that brand, I do think that it's possible to like extend yourself in this way and take that risk, because that you do have that fan base, and that you can push those units. Plus, you have the experience in the industry to hopefully be able to cut down on a lot of things that do eat up money in the development and marketing kind of process. So I mean, I love it because I think that the $60 price point as law just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't. I can't think of any other industry where there's like one established price point for the product. I mean, there's almost always, different like variants and things like that. But like in the game industry, it just hasn't been like that. So I'm glad that it's, that these other companies are like breaking into it. That's like one thing that like I've always appreciated on the Nintendo side is that while the first party games are traditionally on the $60 mark, a lot of like the third party games tend to be like 20, 30 or like $40. So I really hope that like that mentality, can be more prolific so that, we don't have to say, well, it's only a good game if it's $60. Because like that just, if it's not $60, then they couldn't have put in like like the real work on the narrative and the story. So I don't necessarily think it's a trend because, as I said, like you do kind of need, I think, a lot of kind of built-in stuff to be able to make this actually happen. But I hope that in say, I don't know, 4 or 5 years when the next console generation is like a rolling around, I do hope that that this does become more of a reality.
Tanya, do you have any thoughts on the $30 price point as kind of being the nice middle spot for things?
That's a great middle spot. I would buy a lot more games if they were $30. But I'm gonna be legit. I had no idea that Hellblade had a $30 price point. I thought this was like, graphically on par with Horizon Zero Dawn. Has a different aesthetic. It's dark as fuck. But it's I had no clue that this was a $30 mid-range AA verging in a AAA game. So for $30, if I can get that kind of quality, and granted, like Sharif said, everybody can't deliver that quality at a $30 price point retail, but we also live in an age where the digital version will cost me the exact same amount as a physical version, which makes no sense. There's no packaging. There's no nothing. You gave me a code, and now we're even buying physical cases, and I get a code inside.
Right, right.
I give you $65. I want a disc.
That makes sense. I mean, it's real.
So, I would prefer to see things at that price point. Like, I don't know about PUBG. It's not my jam. I didn't know it was just $30. I know Fortnite is what, 20, 30? So I think that price point is going to get a lot of people in the door, especially like if they blew all their money buying their system.
Yeah.
They need a couple games to play. That's going to be a better price point than you drop $400 or $500 on your system, accessories, and you can buy one game and play it. It's like the old days when we bought a Sega and you had one game for like a year because that's all you could buy.
Right.
Word up.
Right. Yeah, I hope that it's. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Reef.
No, I was just going to make just a quick point that, yeah, I agree with like Tanya in that, like when I saw the price of Hellblade and when I found out about the price of Lawbreakers, it was just a no-brainer. Like I usually kind of have to decide a lot about, I don't know if I want to buy this as soon as it drops. There'll probably be a Steam sale so I can get it a little later. But at $30, I'm like, here, like I'll check it out,
Right.
Yeah.
And you don't feel as cheated if you drop 30 versus close to 70. If you don't like it.
Yes.
Agreed. And thank you both for taking my points, you suckers. Anyway,
That's because we're good like that.
It's true. You're both amazing. I think it'll be really cool to see what happens in the next couple of months and see, how or if this is a trend that catches on. I wonder how you can do that. Because I remember Lawbreakers was going to be free to play at first, and then that kind of changed away from that. Fortnite is not necessarily free to play, but it has a lot of microtransactions that you can kind of boost yourself up a little bit, or at least be able to kind of get yourself a little bit further down the line faster. But I'm excited to play Hellblade and see what happens in that space and see if Ninja Theory can kind of recapture that space again. I know Reef and I, when we were at GDC, we sat there with our jaws on the floor when they did their tech demo showcasing the facial capture for that game. So it'll be really cool to see how it plays itself out. Definitely want to see more $30 games. I will be able to buy more games. $30 games, great.
And then you got to buy a hard drive because then you'll run out of room.
My God, I need a hard drive right now. We need a hard drive sponsor. We need a hard drive sponsor real fast. Western Digital. So, yeah, we're about to get up out of here. We want to thank everybody for checking out the show this week, both in the usual spaces that we roam and also in Twitch land. Let us know exactly how we did if you watched the broadcast, and if you listen to everything. Let us know how you liked it. We'll be doing some changes. We're trying to figure out how to maneuver in this space, and I think we did a fairly good job for our first endeavor into Twitch broadcasting. So give us some feedback. Reef is going to give us the social media business where you can give some of that feedback. But throw some stuff also here in the whispers and all that stuff, so we can hear about some of that info here. But Reef, can you share the social media business with people?
Sure. So first thing you want to do is go to spawnon.me. That's where you can find all our past shows, the about us, all that good stuff on there. You can find us on Twitter, where we share all the stuff about the show as well. That is at SpawnOnMe on Twitter. We also have a Facebook page, Spawn on Me Podcast, as well there. And you can send us an email at spawnonmepodcast at gmail.com if you want to give us any longer feedback that can't fit on the social media pages. Also, if you are not watching the live video, you can catch us now every Thursday at 7:30 Pacific, 10:30 Central. Sorry, 10:30 Eastern. I'm getting my time zones all crazy. At twitch.tv/spawnonme. This is our new thing. So make sure if you're just listening to the audio version of this, that you check us out live now on the video where you can talk about things in the chat, like how Echo the Dolphin's body is rotting at the bottom of the ocean. There's all kind of great stuff going on in the chat.
Oh my god!
That's so morbid.
Poor Echo. Yep. Poor Echo the Dolphin. Why y'all hating on Echo? Damn.
Yeah.
Look, Echo's in a tin can, dude. Echo's in a
Wow. Somebody clip that. Wow.
Anywho. In a can. Poor
oh
Echo.
My god. Anywho.
Look, times is hard, and Echo's cheap eating.
Wow. Jeez, man. Thank you to everybody. Thank you. I'm broken. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the show this week and every week. Next week, you need to be back here listening to the podcast and also watching it on Twitch, because the EIC of Waypoint will be rocking with us next week. Austin Walker making his return trip to Chicago, coming and hanging out with us. So that's going to be really fun. We love having Austin on, so that's going to be real dope. And until next week, we're going to get up out of here, and we will say peace.